Hello, thank you so much for tuning in once again to Alpha News. Today we're joined by Representative Eric Lucero. Thanks for being in studio with us.
Thank you for the invite. It's always an honor to join you.
Absolutely. So we have a lot to talk about today. I want to start with the end of session, talk about what happened, why that deal decomposed, what it means for Minnesota. I want to talk about what St. Paul can be doing to make life more affordable for everyday Minnesotans, and I want to close with the Second Amendment question.
All fantastic questions.
Awesome. So to start off with the end of session, what was your impression leaving St. Paul?
Well, it was good and bad.
Okay.
The good part is we didn't have any more spending. The bad part is there are a couple issues that were very important for Minnesotans that should have passed. And so I'll start with the often reported issue. There was a negotiation of $4 billion in new spending in return for $4 billion in tax cuts. Well, the reality is government was fully funded last year to a record amount, over $50 billion for the 2-year biennium. There was no need to fund more money for a bloated government. And unfortunately, that was the conversation and the initiative that both Governor Walz and the Democrat majority in the House were continuing to push. Thank the Lord for the Senate Republicans, because they put the kibosh on what would have been completely out of control new spending. But the negotiated deal, $4 billion in tax cuts for $4 billion in new spending, that was the conversation, and that fell apart at the end because Democrats were holding hostage any new tax cuts for this new spending. And so now the good part is that budget surplus, the projected budget surplus, will remain and be available next year when Republicans recapture the House, retain the Senate, and recapture the governorship, so that we can offer $8 billion in tax cuts and hopefully more.
Absolutely. And what's the plan for preventing future, over-collection of taxes so we don't run into this situation again?
Well, that's what we need to do. We in Minnesota are incredibly overtaxed. Hardworking Minnesotans across the state and businesses are feeling the pain. And so we need to enact deep, permanent tax cuts. Not this gimmick in an election year of a Walz check, right? One time. Deep, permanent tax cuts so we can become a more business-friendly environment, so that we can allow people to work hard and retain the fruits of their labor, not having to shell out more in tax collections to government.
You described this as an election year gimmick. How do you think the negotiations would have looked if we weren't in an election cycle?
Well, the Democrats will never give up on their demands for more spending.
Right.
But again, how arrogant is it to have Governor Walz propose checks with his name on it, right? Walz checks, seriously. So the fact is we just need to allow people to keep their money, and we need to do so by enacting deep, permanent tax cuts.
Absolutely. People need to be keeping more of their money, especially in this economy. What do you think is driving the high cost of living for Minnesotans right now, and what can be done at the state level to alleviate that burden?
Well, clearly, a major contributor is the government printing money and continuing to pump more money into the economy. So when you cannot deny the economic reality of when governments print money, borrow money, and inject that money into the economy, there's a greater money supply. When there's more of something, doesn't matter what it is, any product or service, when there's more of something, the value of that something becomes less, right? The law of supply and demand. And so when government borrowing and printing money, injecting it into the economy, there's more dollars in circulation, those dollars are becoming devalued, and it results in higher prices. And so inflation is the result of government mismanagement. And so that's the major contributing factor. Now you add on top of that the poor policy that Governor Walz and President Biden on the national level continue to push, and that is energy policy. In fact, we recently saw President Biden celebrate the pain that Americans across the country are feeling in terms of he wants to transition away from fossil fuel, right? So he's celebrating this pain because he thinks this is going to help push people towards green energy. And green energy in and of itself, there's all kinds of things to say about that. But among the things that we've highlighted on the House floor is the reality of this so-called green energy coming from countries that engage in slave labor and many other things that we in the United States do not support.
Not to mention that it's not the most reliable thing on earth. It's very difficult to store green energy. If the wind isn't blowing, it's not like those windmills are recharging batteries that can then be brought online. You have to have a backup fossil fuel system anyway.
That's right. 100%. So there's many things that are not part of the conversation Democrats don't want to speak about, but here, just coming back to the cost. We know that gas, groceries, and public safety are among the high priorities right now that Minnesotans are looking to have solved. But Democrats are way out in left field working on issues, their pet projects, to advance the growth of government.
How beholden is the Minnesota economy to the Fed? So when the Fed goes and injects all this new money into the economy, is there anything we can do locally to increase the value of the dollar here, or are we just reacting to whatever they're doing?
Well, one of the things that it's really sad when you see these dollars being dangled by the federal government, whether it be matching dollars or all kinds of dollars to spend on all kinds of programs. You know, we in the state, what we could do on the state level, not just Minnesota, but all 50 states, not spend the money that the federal government is dangling over us.
Just say no.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. Turning now to the firearm and the Second Amendment issue. Obviously what happened in Texas is a tragedy. We're all working to deal with that, report on it. What's your response as a legislator to the national conversation that's occurring right now?
Well, it is absolutely tragic. These atrocities that are occurring, these tragedies, are being performed with, or by, I should say, evil people. And we have to recognize that evil exists. And so when these tragedies occur, we need to figure out what can we do to stop evil before it happens, before such tragedies happen. And that is not being done with more gun control on law-abiding citizens. One of the things that's very frustrating to me, and I think very telling, is within a day of the most recent tragedy occurring, I had phone calls, and emails from people seeking more gun restrictions. The facts weren't even out yet. We didn't even know at the time, you know, any of the details, or very few of the details of how this occurred or the background of the individual, the perpetrator. And nevertheless, there are calls for the scripted response. That tells me, and the reason that's telling for me is, unfortunately, there are those out there that will have no reservation using tragedy to advance their political agenda. Now, when it comes to guns specifically, in the conversations I've been having with constituents is the following. The Second Amendment has been around for over 200 years. Guns in our country have been around for over 200 years. So when we examine the equation of what's happening in society, the one part of the equation that hasn't changed is the gun part and the Second Amendment part, right? That's been there. So we have to examine what has changed. And once we know what has changed, we can then focus on that root cause. So if we eliminate the Second Amendment and the guns being what's changed, well, that allows us then to more accurately focus on other aspects. So guns, it was a common practice, even up to the decades of the 90s, for children to bring their firearms to school, shotguns, 22 gauge rifles, and put them in the vehicles, put them in the lockers, or store them in the back of the classroom. And there wasn't these tragedies. These mass shootings didn't occur. But they're occurring today. So the question is, what has changed? And I think a major contributor to that answer is the devaluing of life.
That's a good point. And people don't realize until 1986, you could literally buy a machine gun at Kmart. I mean, guns used to be even more accessible than they are now. They've been part of the American story since the very beginning. But how do we bring value back to human life? I mean, that's a broad goal. It's a good goal, but what are the policy suggestions that could get us there?
Well, there are many contributing factors, I think, into the devaluing or desensitization of people and their mindset towards others. So first and foremost would be just life in the womb. Is life precious from conception to natural death? That has to be a reality, because if life is precious, then that's promoted in our culture that life has value. But unfortunately, there are all too many right now that are pushing that certain life, certain age groups, whether it be in the womb or on the other end of the spectrum, have lost their value, are no longer a contributor to society, and therefore we can think lesser of them, right?
Yeah. It seems like the hypothesis here is that America is sick right now. The morals of this country are deteriorating. Shootings are one symptom of the general moral decline that's occurring.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. In Minnesota, what does our gun law situation look like? What's on the landscape in St. Paul?
Well, I've been a member of the Public Safety Committee for my entire time in office. And the last several years, with Democrats in control, they have been pushing red flag gun confiscation orders. They've been pushing universal background checks.
Tell us a little bit about the red flag laws, because some of our viewers know what those are, some probably don't.
Sure. So red flag gun confiscation orders are, it allows for another individual to go to a court and say that this person is a threat to themselves or others, and then the court it empowers the court to confiscate the firearms of that person.
How do they get them back? And does this take away their gun rights permanently, or is it just sort of like a freeze period?
Well, that is exactly the challenge that we've been debating not only in the Public Safety Committee, but on the House floor when this issue has come up, because it violates due process. It doesn't allow a person to confront their accusers. And many times it's reported anonymously.
It's so easy to see how that could be politicized.
100%.
If you disagree with somebody in a business deal, if you have a bitter end to a romantic relationship,
Absolutely.
you can anonymously red flag your partner and send police to their front door.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And then, then you have all kinds of other scenarios. Like, let's just say there's a married couple, and let's say one of the married couple, let's say the guns belong to the other person in the couple. Now, does that mean that the constitutional rights of the other individual can be violated because a third party made a report against another person in the couple, right? Or how about you have a couple with an adult son under the same roof, and if somebody else reports the child or the son, and there's firearms in the home, does that give now leverage for the government to come in and unconstitutionally confiscate the firearms of somebody who's not part of that, right? There's all kinds of problems here. Then other challenges are, who stores it?
Yeah.
Who stores these firearms? What is the process to get them back?
Yeah.
And it's just a whole host of issues.
Absolutely. You mentioned universal background checks. This is a confusing issue because every time I've gone to an FFL and tried to buy a firearm, I've had to wait for the background check to clear NICS. What more could be done? I mean, what are they even asking for?
What they're looking for is background checks every time a firearm is transferred from one individual to another.
Private parties as well.
Exactly. So every scenario, it could be from a father to a son. It could be from a friend to a friend in, let's just say, for the weekend. Let's say you and let's say I had firearms, you didn't.
Okay.
I had a shotgun, you didn't.
Right.
We were going to go hunting next weekend.
Right.
In order for me to borrow you for the weekend now, that hunting party for just, let's say, Saturday, Sunday,
right.
I'm going to transfer my firearm to you. You would have to go undergo a background check in order to be the recipient of that. Right now, the hunting's over.
Right.
You want to give my firearm back to me. I have to undergo a background check in order for you to give me my firearm back.
It seems like this is totally unenforceable, and it's going to create an entire class of criminals that don't need to be criminals.
100%. That's exactly the problem with universal background checks and all of these gun control restrictions. They're focusing on law-abiding citizens. They're making it more difficult for law-abiding citizens, not focusing the attention on those that are perpetrating these acts of evil.
That is really what's so amazing to me about the gun conversation is you have maybe 10, 12 people a year that perpetrate these heinous acts, and you have over 100 million gun owners in America. Why would you criminalize basically everyone in the Midwest to prevent a few people in states that already restrict, guns from doing these mass shootings? It doesn't make sense. I thought the Democrats wanted to empty the jails, not fill them up with farmers.
Well, yeah, exactly. But that, again, it highlights the reality that this really isn't about truth or facts.
Right.
It's about a hatred for guns. And I don't, that to
What
me
is
is a
that
sick
motivated
fascination.
by? Because a lot of people suggest that, the government wants to disarm people to increase the amount that they can be subjugated. What's your theory on why the Democrats at an upper level want to restrict guns?
That I don't even have an answer for. What is it in the mind of the Democrats that they have this sick focus on an instrument, a tool, when the act of evil originates in the heart?
Right.
Things are a heart. These evil perpetrators it's an act of that originates in the heart, not the instrument. Now, if somebody has hatred, evil in their heart, and they may not have a firearm available to them, they can use other instruments to perform their acts of evil.
Like driving a car through a parade.
Driving a car through a parade, explosion of a bomb, machetes, knives, all kinds of things.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Not to get too in the weeds here, but have you seen these videos where blue checks on Twitter are taking their AR-15s and smashing them to bits with hammers? Have you seen this?
I have not seen that, but...
Right, it's occurring. What mystifies me so much about this is that by destroying a gun that you already own, you're admitting that you don't trust yourself. And it's really removing the locus of control, and you're saying, I don't have any control over my own actions. This inanimate object controls my actions. And it's strange to see that difference between the left and the right. I feel like the right believes that, like you say, people's actions originate in their heart and are under their own control, whereas the left believes that there's this external object that spontaneously causes people to behave violently. It's very strange.
I think you may hit on a larger point there of the progressive left worldview,
right.
Because they continue, whether it be on this topic or other topics, the conversations that we've had in the last number of years includes there's these external forces that impact people's lives, and everybody is just drifting in the wind throughout life, completely controlled by these external forces, whether it be the topics of racism they're talking about or job advancement and all the different contexts in our life. But the reality is we are individuals, and this is one thing that I've highlighted in committee and on the floor. I am not, and here's what I say, I am not a victim. I am somebody who makes choices in my life to purpose myself to advance. And it's not some external force. Now, external forces may be an influence, but it's ultimately up to me and my individual choices where I'm going to go in life.
And this circles back to all these critical theories that we hear about. That is the central tenet of the critical theories, the critical race theory, critical gender theory, is people are randomly floating in the wind and these social forces are acting against them, and you can only understand the individual as the sum of the social forces that they interact with. And I think this is so essential to the left, and it's something that a lot of people don't understand, is this philosophical difference between the left and the right.
No, that's exactly right. And another contributing factor is between the left and the right, is individuals have individual liberty. Whereas the other side, and with a collectivist groupthink worldview, that rights belong to the group. And therefore, if you have a majority of 50% plus one, that government can take those liberties or those rights away. That is how we come, circling back down to the gun debate, that's what complicates this issue. The gulf between the left and the right is that the right believes in and upholds the constitutional principle of individual liberty and holding individuals accountable for their actions. Whereas the left wants to say the collective is more important, and the collective can then infringe on the rights of any individual if it's for the quote-unquote good of the whole.
It's tricky to balance these, though, because sometimes you run into a situation like we have right now with the economy, where individuals are suffering, and we have to think about Minnesota farmers as a collective group, and sometimes we're going to have to do things that it prioritizes groups over individuals. Maybe we need some sort of stimulus package for farmers. Maybe we need some sort of tax relief for single mothers during the formula shortage. It gets contentious once you get into specific issues.
No, that is, so we don't live in a vacuum. So you are spot on. We absolutely have to look at individual case-by-case scenarios. But in all of these scenarios, what is frustrating is the progressive left wants to push government as the solution. When in many cases, the origins, if you were to peel back some of these layers of the onion, these crises that are happening, whether it be the formula for mothers right now, whether it be some of the struggles that farmers are going through, a lot of it has a significant, if not the sole contributing factor of government poor policy that's being pushed from progressives on the national level or the state level.
Another sort of macro question, maybe beyond the scope of what we're even talking about, but how do you think it got to this point? Because when I read American history, I see that churches used to be more active in communities. I see that farmers co-ops used to play a more active role in the economy. How did we end all those private institutions and end up tossing everything to the government?
Well, the answer to that would be it would take way longer than we've got time for. But one of the things that I use when having this conversation to use as an analogy is I've never broken a bone, so I've never had to wear a cast. But there are many of those that have, and they understand, even if you haven't, you understand the following principle. When you wear a cast for several weeks or months, the muscle groups in that area become weak because they're not being used. So the lack of use of a muscle group results in weakness. And so what we've seen now, to answer your question, in society, as we've seen government grow in size, scope, and power over the decades, infringing on areas traditionally taken care of by individuals or nonprofits or other organizations, the muscle groups of these other institutions throughout society have grown weakened. We've also seen that on an individual and family level, as government has grown, the individual ability for people to take care of themselves, the responsibility, that muscle group has grown less. It's lessened. It's weakened.
Atrophied. Yeah,
exactly. So it has resulted in dependence. So we've slid away from independence in many of these areas, and the muscle groups that allow for independence have grown weaker. So to return to that, because we have here's another analogy. It's a series of analogies. Another analogy is there are many, including myself, throughout society, we struggle with weight. I don't wake up one morning, look in the mirror, and become disgusted with myself and say, you know what, I'm now overweight. I need to lose weight now. Well, it doesn't happen that way. I didn't get overweight and where I was overnight. It was one spoon of chocolate ice cream at a time over a period. And so if we wake up and are frustrated at the size, scope, and power of government, we can't expect an immediate change. Because we didn't get there overnight, we're not going to roll it back overnight. And so we need to, as a society and as leaders in influential portions of society, government and others, we need to continue to promote the truth that independence is the best way to pursue happiness and allow for the maximum outcome in life for every single one of us, not growing government and having some solution from government.
I was at the store the other day and I saw somebody, this is true, this is unbelievable. They were wearing an N95 mask, a cloth mask on top of it, and goggles, lab goggles. And I thought to myself,
Wow.
how did they get to that point that, 2.5 years later, however long it's been, we have this person who's still so afraid to leave their house. And I think it's because, the independence muscles there have atrophied. They've been in this cast of the media environment, of the regulatory environment, and now the muscles that would make them brave enough to go outside without a mask are totally gone. And it's shocking how quickly that can happen.
That's
because
right.
We think of these on a civilizational scale all the time. As a country, our independence muscles are waning, but also your individual drive for freedom and independence can wane over the period of just a few short months.
That's right.
And I think it's important that people remain cognizant of that. You are not immune to propaganda.
That's right, and a lot of that, unfortunately, on the House floor and other places, I've called it the government. What did I say? I try to remember the name of it, but it was the government, corporate media, academic complex.
Yeah, right.
And it's because these institutions, these three institutions, are working together. Most of them are dominated by progressives, and they're working together to promote this idea that is having a significant influence, eroding the ability for people to think critically, to think independently, and allow for them to just take their own actions.
Here's an interesting question. Do you think everybody on the House floor is thinking independently? Are the legislators capable of independent thought, or are a lot of these people also just caught up in the trends?
Well, unfortunately, there is, the answer is no. They're not thinking independently. There are a great number that are thinking independently and can look 3, 4, 5 steps down the road. But unfortunately, there are too many legislators that are thinking for the immediate, having an immediate knee-jerk reaction, an emotional reaction to something that might be occurring on any topic, rather than thinking 3, 5 steps down the road, what is the natural outcome?
When you pass a law, that law is on the books until it gets repealed, which is very hard to do. So these knee-jerk reactions, you build up layers and layers and layers of knee-jerk responses, then you end up with a state that can't get anything done.
That's exactly right.
That's how it
Good
happens.
policy is never the product of an emotional reaction on any topic. Because as you're right, they don't naturally have a sunset. These policies are provisions that are passed. And so yes, when a policy is passed as a result of a knee-jerk emotional reaction that may have unintended consequences because of lack of forethought, lack of discussion, the consequences then are resulting for years.
Personally, as a lawmaker, what do you do to get out of your own head, to get out of your own personal time horizon and try to make decisions that are good for the state as a whole?
Well, I have an ongoing philosophy that I hold to, and that is I am the least intelligent person in the room. And the reason I think that and have that mentality is because I'm looking for the ideas of others. I want other people to give me their opinions, because there's many things out there that I may not have thought of, or the combination, let's say 2 or 3 other people having said things to me or come up with ideas, allow me to construct these multiple pieces of feedback to formulate a better policy proposal. And so how I get out of my own head is, again, having that mentality. I'm not the smartest person in the room. I want to hear the feedback of others. And even more so, I enjoy having conversations with people that I don't agree with. I don't like the echo chamber effect.
Of course.
And so that's how I am able to stay grounded. And again, having to hear a diverse amount of opinions.
I feel like just observationally, that brand of humility is more common on the right than the left, partly because of the right's foundation in Christianity and religiosity, where the entire point of Christianity is humility and subservience to God, and that's not something you see on the ultra-humanist left. So I feel like the default state of conservatives makes them more likely to be able to get out of themselves and to look at the progression of politics beyond just their own personal horizon.
Yeah, no, you have a great point there, because the humanistic philosophy is I don't need to change, right? Accept me as I am, and there's no, and in addition, have no expectation that I'm going to improve at all, because I'm as good as I can get.
Yeah, and you are the center of your own reality, whereas conservatives tend to believe that they're part of greater systems that, and it's important to preserve those and protect those. Very interesting.
100%.
We've covered a lot of ground today. Is there anything that you'd like to talk about that we haven't got to yet?
Well, I think the topics we've touched on are going to be among those as we enter in here to the months leading up to the November election. We have a significant, I think, winds blowing in our direction.
Yeah.
Because people are beginning to see the truth. They're seeing the reality. They're feeling it every time they have to fill their gas tank.
Right.
They're feeling the pain every time they have to go buy some eggs or meat.
Yeah.
And these are the product we were discussing. These have been the product of government attempted to engineer and sway society one direction or another based on who not owns, but who occupies the office of president or governor.
Absolutely.
And so my final thoughts would be enjoy summer the best you can,
Yep.
but then we have a lot of hard work to do to change direction here in Minnesota in the November elections.
Of course. Well, we look forward to seeing that unfold, and we'll have you back to talk about it.
All right, thank you so much.